All right, all right, all right, all right. I am Marwan Cameron. This is the conduit. I haven't done that in a while. Kind of miss it, but I'm back, back, baby. I am back. Welcome, everybody. This is the best hour of your day. You know what? It's so good today. We had to do more than an hour, so we're here for 90 minutes today. We're going to come at you with a really hard hitting show. This is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. You know what time it is. You know how we do. But you know I don't do it by myself, right? I have the one, the only, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, let me bring to the stage Mark Boatride Frost. How you doing, sir?
Pretty good, but after this show, I can neither confirm nor deny that I am Mark Boatride Frost.
How's it going? How you doing?
I'm doing really well. I've been working on this presentation for a while. It's big. I try and keep it interesting, and you don't have to know a whole lot of math to figure this out. I mean, it's just basically going to talk about how the economy ended up being the way it is.
All right. Well, we're going to jump right into it because we want to jump into it. There's a lot to unpack. So, do you want me to pull up the PowerPoint?
Go ahead and pull it up, and let's go through it.
Let's go.
All right. So I'm gonna have to flag you, I guess, for I'll just say change slide as we go through it. We haven't really rehearsed this, so he's coming at this blind.
Good morning. Okay. Good afternoon, Rob. Thank you for joining us. Rob.
So it's just going to be a look at economics, but this isn't going to be a look at economics like you hear from the Fed or from the World Bank. We're not going to talk about interest rates. We're going to talk about how our economy became the way it is. And we're going to start from the very beginning. It's going to be very straightforward. And I'm hoping you guys have some questions to answer so that I can know what I didn't think of. So go ahead and change the slide. Oh, there we go. Okay, so in the beginning, this is the whole thing's about providing context because you can't really understand the economy in the snippets that we have, even in decades long looks. You have to look over a long period of time to see how things shifted and changed as we came forward. So we're going to start about in the beginning. What is an economy? How did we start becoming an economy? That'll be done in a couple sections. We're going to talk about the concentration of money, and then we're going to talk about the pending collapse, which everyone is talking about and in one way or another, or threatening, and everybody else is saying, no, we're fine. We just need to do this, or that, and the other thing. I'll let you make up your own mind whether we're crazy or not. But there's also a way we can change things, and we'll talk about that at the very end. I didn't put that here because it's really not part of the context.
It's not germane.
Huh?
It's not germane to the conversation.
It's not germane to the context, but it is germane to the conversation, just not in the same thing. So let's go to the next slide. In the beginning, go ahead. We had resources, humanity, and a fundamental shift in our thinking that brought us where we are. Go next one. Okay. So we're pretty, I mean, any of us who've gone through high school pretty much know that we went through a hunter-gatherer phase, which you may not realize that phase lasted for millions of years. I mean, well over 1 million, possibly closer to 2, before we changed our mode to being less nomadic, more in one place. But in that time, we moved because food and resources demanded we move. We couldn't overfeed in one area, or there'd be nothing left. So we moved somewhere else, meaning we were very resource dependent at that point, and our survival depended on it. So we didn't really have society beyond family and tribe. And I'm not even sure anthropologically if we even had the definition of those ideas yet. That came later. So Marwan, you want to go next slide? All right. So then in the Fertile Crescent, which is now today Syria, we discovered agriculture. And the Fertile Crescent kind of is a descriptive of the fact that we started settling down, we started having abundance and resources, and we started having time for society to develop and grow. And that was kind of, we were there for so a couple 3,000 years, and then when we got enough abundance, we moved to the next step. If you want to change the slide. All right. So then we started locking up the food and locking up the resources for safety, and class systems were formed where there were the people who managed the food and the people who needed the food, and humanity took a step onto an evolutionary path that we're on now. And I know you can read all of that, but I kind of want to emphasize um, the fact that when that happened, it was a fundamental shift in how and what humanity is. We became um, what Daniel Quinn calls the taker culture, where we started forming a one right way. And if you'll go to the next slide, well, the next two slides kind of cover the rest of that. So, assimilation. I mean, we all know, a lot of us know about the Borg in Star Trek. So I'm going to use a Star Trek analogy here. Is we started assimilating other cultures because we had the resources, and they would come to the central culture because they wanted what the other people had: an easier way of life, more leisure, culture, arts, the things that were developing. So essentially, we started assimilating other cultures, which disappeared into the one right way taker culture that we have a model of. And again, I'm using Quinn's analogy. It's not quite apt in my mind, but it kind of gives you an idea. If you go to the next slide, we'll talk about a historical context to this. So this is a picture of an Indian school. There, I could have chosen slave boats. I could have done slave markets. I could have done 1,000 different things that would be meaningful in the context of how assimilation worked. There were people that came to the abundant culture to become partake of the resources. There were other people that it just
That's kind.
Huh?
To partake of the resources.
Well, to become part of the class system, and hopefully get resources. That was where the idea of we can climb our way to wealth in this model. And back then it was probably more true than it is today. But we also assimilated people and took, like, the Native Americans, we put them in schools and we tried to indoctrinate them. We've killed millions and millions of people that didn't agree with our way of life. We've enslaved them. And that is the course of the evolutionary path that we were on, where few would gain and the masses would not. And so about 15,000 years ago, we shifted to the economic model that would become capitalism today. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to talk about concentration of wealth now. You kind of understand the cultural model in a very brief amount of time. Let's talk about the financial model behind it. Next slide. Okay, so back in the hunter-gatherer days, and even into the agricultural days, you either made things for yourself, your tribe, or your family would make things, and that's how you acquired stuff: tools, pans, ways to cook in your fire. You would make them yourself. Next slide. And then we ended up with specialization. And that means people got better at certain things. There would be people who would prepare skins. There would be people who would fire pots. There were people who would be making tools. There were people who would be hunting. And you ended up with specialization that people got better at one thing. And that just kind of morphed into what we have today, where you have a silo where you can do this and this is what you can do. There used to be a commercial about join the army, be all you can be. And then there was the return joke is, no, the army will tell you this is all you can be, learn how to do this. But we exchange goods for services. So if I was good at hunting and I came back with like a whole bunch of rabbits, I would change the rabbits for more arrows. Or, if I was really good at cooking, I would prepare food for people and they would make pots for me. And it was basically skill for service or tool for tool, kind of an exchange rate. And it's interesting to find that there's a huge movement to return to a barter system here because money doesn't work for everybody because there's not enough of it. This was extremely localized, and there were markets that developed, and I don't mean markets like the stock market. I mean, like, they would have markets and other tribes would come by and do exchanges over time. So it was the beginning of exchange. Go to the next slide. Okay, so the next step to that was to commonize an exchange rate. And it allowed the areas to expand more, to have more flexibility in what you exchange for what. Metals became common, coins were pressed for all different places. Then the coins started becoming more consolidated under city states, and more, and the exchange rate more equalized. So that was the beginning of real commerce. It was also the beginning of wealth accumulation. So, next slide. Okay, so that was also the point between that slide and this slide where human beings stop being in the equation except as consumers and ways to gather wealth. Over the last 70 years, we have moved away from making tools that lasted and worked for us to using massive amounts of resources and using planned obsolescence so that you would have to continually replace tools and replace clothes. We had design for fashion as opposed to use. Talk to most women, and they will tell you that women's pants have no place to store anything, which, so they have purses as another accessory. There's a whole consumer mentality that went into this, and it became about the accumulation of wealth as opposed to the meeting of a human need to expand and grow. It also changed the way we innovate, focused on profit as opposed to uh, creating new things that would better serve humankind. Next slide. All right. So I'm a little hardcore at the bottom of this one, but capitalism, the way it works for most people, is that you have the people at the top who generally don't do enough to qualify 300 times the income of the people doing the work in the middle and bottom. But that's the way it works. They get an extreme amount of wealth off the backs of the people who are working. And this is the way capitalism works. And I will say, unregulated capitalism, it wasn't always as bad, but now that the horses are out of the barn, trying to get them back into the barn is a very difficult task. Trying to get the government to regulate the people who are essentially paying for their elections by supporting them through their election process is going to be very difficult. Um, and if you don't think that this is real, I have to say you're kind of deluded. Look around you. It's the model you see everywhere. And this is what capitalism has become. It doesn't serve anybody. Next slide. All right. So the stock market. The original concept of the stock market was, again, back many years, back about a century. It became an organized and regulated way for people to use their excess income to help invest in companies that provided products for the needs of consumers. Think about, it's now 1910, and you had 500 extra dollars, which would make you wealthy about then, and you decided to invest in this company called Levi Strauss. And that's what you do because they make really good clothes for people to wear. Or you would invest in Sears or tool makers to make tools, Milwaukee, such like that. What the current reality is the stock market is essentially legalized gambling, commodities market as well. And the thing is that you got to understand is the house and the people who are at the top hold an exponential advantage for gaining capital in it. If you're trying to day trade and make a fortune, the odds are heavily against you. Next slide. All right, so we have a toxic culture. Um, Wealth is basically driven. I mean, people like the billionaires. Many of them are driven by fear and a need for security. They continue to gather wealth at all costs because they feel insecure and they don't feel like they're enough to do anything. And if we go back to thinking about that picture with the guy playing golf atop, he's not really doing anything to generate the wealth that he's given. It's now just generating for itself. He's not innovating, and many of the people at the top of the food chain never innovated. They had other people innovate for them. I just saw something about Elon Musk. He was not the one who came up with Tesla. They'll ask people today, and they'll say he was. There were two other engineers who are no longer around who actually did the development to create the vehicle. So you have these people that have so much, but they haven't done anything to deserve it. And in our culture, the more parochial version of our culture tells us we have to deserve what we have. So they gather more and more and more because if they have so much, then they must be okay, even though psychologically they are not. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but this is pretty common behavior for even basic psychology. So they create the originators or the people who started this process, and they're not the same ones in charge of it now. It's more a playbook than it is an actual evil genius controlling everything. And people just get good at the playbooks, and if you were born into that, you learn how to do it very early on. But they're the people who created the class systems, and then so few of us are ever taught or understand how those systems work. We can't really transition between them like the dream says we should. And therefore, very, very few people actually be successful, but it's frequently not because they are better than you are at it. It's because they are, in fact, more ruthless than you. So, going back to Star Trek again, the need of the few or the one and the few overrates over the needs of the many. It's like I have this emptiness, I need to feed it, so I'm going to keep feeding it, and the rest of you are just going to have to fend for yourselves. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Do better. But there's no ladder, so don't worry about that. Just keep pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. This is, and I know that a lot of people say these things and they get really angry and are, I deserve more. We deserve different. And to get different, you don't get angry, you work on different. So resources are a means to wealth development. Anyway, so the point is that our need is shelter, food, humanity, water, communication, education. And I don't mean education in the way we're educating now because we aren't. And I'm sorry to all the teachers out there, you're doing a great job, but the system isn't set up to actually teach people. And healthcare. We need to have these needs met. And if we're not getting those needs met, and the wealthy have resources and resources and resources, then it's an imbalanced system. And we need to look at a way to rebalance that to our humanity. Next slide. All right, so I put this up for Marwan because it's one of his favorite things.
I appreciate that.
I'm going to be using I'm going to be using pyramids a lot during this show. But this one, I wanted to point out that because of the way our culture is, it keeps the vast majority of us in the bottom two tiers just trying to survive. But our humanity drives us to find self-actualization. It's something that we are wired to try and do. And until we stepped off of our evolutionary path, we were taking a long, slow road to get there. Now, until we can reprogram our culture to support our humanity, and I know y'all can read, we continue to erode and destroy our foundation. So let's talk about that. While the money's going to the top, our power infrastructure hasn't changed at all in almost 80 years. The Paradise Fire was caused by a piece that had been in place for over 90 years. So we are not fixing infrastructure. We are not building on the foundations. We are not providing means and opportunity for people to grow and rise up to self-actualization. We are essentially feeding a whole bunch of very wealthy people more wealth that they cannot see the need to share with anyone else because it's filling the hole inside of them. Next slide.
Remind me to come back to this chart once we have our discussion too. I actually like this version.
I thought you might. So let's talk about the collapse. I mean, the thing that people don't really want to talk about because they don't want to believe it, and that everyone keeps trying to move away from. We're all fine, right? We're all fine. Let's talk about what that looks like. So we're going to talk about the lifestyles of the poor and homeless. Next slide. Yeah, capitalism isn't working. Insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different outcome. We are doing the same thing over and over again and not looking at the parts that we don't want to see. So the thing is that we need to step away from the wall together and look down the wall to see if there's a different door than we're looking at, because we aren't getting forward here. And I just want to start with this one, and then let's talk about how we got here. Next slide. All right. So let's start a baseline here of what healthy capitalism is. It's where wealth is more equitably distributed and regulated in our system. And this was true up until the 80s when it wasn't. And then it kind of changed. And then we kept deregulating and changing things until everything's at risk. And this is what a healthy one looks like. And it's not that this is what exists today. I don't even know if it ever existed truly because of the cultural model that started 50,000 years ago. But it's what the model we are sold looks like. There's opportunity at all levels. There's a healthy, thriving middle class. None of that can be said today. Next slide. Another pyramid for you.
You want the next slide?
Yeah, next slide, please. All right, so this is what capitalism looks like today. And that slide didn't line up well. So 80%, and actually a little bit more than that, of all revenue is in the top 10%'s hands. The middle class is essentially disappearing, and poverty is extreme and growing, which means the unhoused, the homeless, the unhoused will be more evident, and it's going to be around us all the time because it's collapsing. It cannot do anything but collapse because it is top heavy, and the people at the bottom who have been providing all of the revenue in a healthy model to the people at the top are now overburdening all systems, and no one can afford to pay for it. So we need to look at a different way of doing things. And when you hear people say that, yeah, we're looking for ways to fix this thing, yeah, okay, so that's fine. Let's see if we can figure out how to house people. But you can't fix it until you look at this dead in the eye and figure out a way to fix it, to work on a broader scale. Next slide. All right. So this is the part I had to have the piece here. So lack of transparency, overcomplication of processes and data is what causes us to believe something that isn't true. So let's talk about the GDP, gross domestic product, for a moment. William Petty came up with the basic concept of GDP to attack landlords against unfair taxation during warfare with the Dutch and the English in 1654. Charles Davenant developed the method further in 1695, but it was Simon Kuznets in 1934 who introduced it to a U.S. Congress in a report, and he warned against the use of this as a measurement for the health of the economy. The guy who developed it in a report for Congress said, this is really not a good thing. So what did we do? We made that the primary measurement of the health of the U.S. economy. So we need to, one of the things that happens with the GDP is we change what's measured. We used to measure steak as how much steak is bought because the GDP essentially measures what we buy. So we used to buy a lot of steak, and suddenly they said, well, steak isn't relevant anymore. We're going to make it hamburger. How would that change the health look of our economy? We shift the meaning, and therefore we shift what's measured and how it's measured. Changing the term, and that is an actual example, by the way. Changing the terminology changes the understanding. We don't use the word depression anymore. We call them the recessions. because depression is bad. It's what happened in 2029. We can't ever have it again. But we can have lots and lots and lots of recessions. But we're not looking at the problem in macro. We're looking at little instances, and we're not fixing the problem because we can't look at the whole thing. And I will go back to when I say we don't have an education system that supports us. That's part of the reason is we don't teach things now that we desperately need to teach. Okay, so not talking about the data changes the understanding, lack of transparency. This should not be hard data to find. It should not be hard data to understand. And it's the manipulation that becomes really easy when you don't keep things transparent and when you make things really complex. Do you really think our tax system has to be this freaking complex? No, but keeping it complex keeps it good for the wealthy and bad for everybody else. Next slide. Oh, sorry. The last slide was in this shell game, the ball's missing from the cup. So, economic indicators. Let's talk about different indicators. The Depression, at the end of the Depression, a Banking Act of 1933, Glass-Steagall was put in place to keep the commercial and the individual banking accounts separate. Banks could no longer use individual funds to invest in unsafe, more commercial models. It's much more complex than that, but that kind of gives you the idea. And so that was put into place, and it stayed in place, and it kept us from having another depression. It kind of was a wall for banks to not abuse the system. At the end of Dwight Eisenhower's presidency, he warned of the development of the military-industrial complex, the war machine, and how dangerous that can be, and how they will promote wars so they can sell materials and continue to grow exponentially. And I think we've all seen how the multitude of wars is tantamount to what they're doing. In Nixon, while I know there's a lot of people who bash Nixon, and there's all kinds of reasons to bash him. And this particular instance is one of the biggest reasons. But he also developed the EPA and did a lot for the environment. So no one person is evil. You have to take them in total as opposed to pieces. And yes, he did bad things, but as a whole, you have to look at the whole life, not just pieces of it. So he took us off the gold standard. Before that, every dollar we had was backed by gold in Fort Knox, by the U.S. gold store. And once that changed, it was a statement that said, "Well, we don't need this; it's too restrictive. So we are going to say that our gold is backed by our ability to manufacture," which worked all the way through the Reagan years, where they deregulated industry and started offshoring jobs and manufacturing. So we stopped manufacturing here. We started manufacturing in China and Indonesia and all these other places where there's no environmental laws, which Nixon put into place, and that we can keep the products cheaper. And we are now, remember, we're selling products to people that don't last very long, so they have to buy more and more and more of them. So it's a very short-sighted look that people are going to continue to have money to support those sales when the pyramid is with a heavy bottom and everybody's making money. But now we have a pyramid that's opposite, and that's going to start collapsing, which I'm going to stop for a second and sidestep to talk about how governments in Washington State get revenue. They get their primary form of revenue is from sales tax, and people are not buying what they used to buy. And there are fewer wealthy people and a whole lot more people in poverty. So sales tax is not generating the income it once generated. And cities and counties and the state are hurting because of it. And they're looking for other ways to replace that income so that they can meet the very baseline, I do mean the baseline, almost sub-baseline of services they are required to give. And you have to understand that their restriction, while they're not saying that we don't have the money to do this, is a fact. They don't have the money to do this. But no politician ever gets reelected by saying we don't have the money to meet the needs of the people. So these are the things that are going on. Now, Clinton continued the offshoring, So it's not just red or blue, it's everybody. And he repealed with Alan Greenspan, the head of the Fed. They worked with Congress to repeal Glass-Steagall, which were the laws that were put into place to keep banks from abusing the system and overinvesting. 8 years later, we had a major recession, and we've been in rolling recessions ever since. And now they start saying, our economy, 10 years ago, we used to hear about retail numbers every year. Now we don't hear about those anymore because they're not very good. And we start looking at boom and bust situations, which we'll talk about in just a second. And I want everybody to think here now. 46% of Americans, almost 50%, that's 1 in 2 people, are one paycheck away from being homeless. And with the private equity purchase of apartment buildings and income housing, and the lack of low income housing and affordable housing, and the numbers that have been manipulated horribly for those the market value of housing, there's no such thing as affordable housing anymore, because they're based on people having $104,000 income, where they can pay $2,000 a month or $2,500 a month for rent. Most people can't do that. So we need some transparency and some honesty here. We'll talk a little bit about that shortly, but let's talk about economic bubbles, which is now what we look at instead of real economic trends. And this has changed step by step by step by step by step ever since we went off the gold standard, and probably a bit before then. And understand, these people think they're the only ones doing it. They don't look at the big picture. They don't look at the consequences, long-term consequences of what they're doing. They're looking at quarterly profit, and that's as far out as they look. The next stock report, the next quarterly profit. Economic bubbles. War is an economic bubble. We end up with a boosted economy because of war. So we have wars, lots of wars. They're not needful wars. We all have been asking those questions since Vietnam. Essentially, why are we doing this? Why are we here? Why are we spending the money? Where is our business in this situation? And we hear all of this rhetoric about it, but the truth is, when you get to the bottom line, we shouldn't be there. We should be looking for, war is the last option when all diplomacy fails, except when economics is involved. So infrastructure. We had an infrastructure boom in the 1950s with the war tax, the taxation on profits after the war. We built most of the infrastructure that we currently use today, the electrical infrastructure, communication infrastructure. All of that was started in the 1960s and 50s of the last century. We haven't upgraded it much since then, because we haven't had the revenue, because we were taxing corporations up to 90% of their profits in the 1950 all the way through the 1960s. And that money was used to generate the building of the infrastructure. It was the biggest boon for construction and union workers there was. It was a great time, but it was short-lived. I'm going to say real estate parts 1, 2, and 3, because it's been back 2 or 3 times. We're in the final part of a housing bubble now, but there was one in the 70s. And in the 70s, interesting thing happened. Prior to the 70s, a single person in a household could buy a house. In the 1970s, those rules got changed. It takes 2 people providing incomes to purchase a house. So as we looked forward into this, we found ourselves in a tighter squeeze and less people able to buy homes and live the American dream. So from the 1970s to today, it's only gotten worse. Tech, we've seen the tech bubble in the 1980s and 90s. There have been a couple brief resurgences, but essentially it was all based on the innovation and investment in tech. And then we had the tech bust, because they were throwing money at things that couldn't possibly be supported long term, and so the market crashed. Retail has been an ongoing one. That our retail sales, we heard about that for years in the late 90s. That retail was providing the engine for America. Infrastructure, again, we just had an infrastructure bill passed, and then there's the whole. I'm just going to call it the con game of the stock market and day trading and the seeking of wealth. Again, we go back to, we changed from meeting people's needs and making sure people live to generating wealth for the few. And that shift fundamentally changed humanity. Humanity is no longer a factor in the equations. Short-term profit is. One click, Marwan, because I've got something at the bottom here. So, conclusion, the value of the US dollar is based on faith. Does that make you feel warm and fuzzy?
I know about warm and fuzzy.
So, faith is everything. I mean, that should be like, the big thing. We have faith in the almighty dollar.
We do. Sadly. The false faith.
Yeah. Well, the whole world does. So we're not alone. Next slide. All right. I'm not even going to ask how many people know what Bohica means, but
I thought that said biatch.
Bohica
Sorry, no levity, because you've been going on for a while, so I just need to make people laugh there.
Well, and Bohica is basically a military nomenclature for bend over, here it comes again. So that's the life we live. Reminder that words and meanings. Last week I talked a lot about that words are often used against us and the meanings change. So I want to be really clear here that 46% and growing of Americans are one paycheck away from homelessness. But let's make that into real numbers. That's 300. We have 339 million people in this country. It's almost 340 million people in this country. 156,398,419 people out of our population are one paycheck away from being unhoused. That means that the two people in this room, in the room with you, you're like, one of you is likely to become unhoused.
Right.
Okay. So let's look at it that way, because I say that and people go, huh? And it goes no farther. This is not an uh-huh. This is, we're freaking in big, deep trouble up to our chins, and we're barely able to breathe. We need to start paying attention to it.
Absolutely.
So most of the information offered is subject to fact checking and historical context. It means that if you want to know why things are as bad as they are, you need to do some fact checking and look at what people are telling you and realize that it's a lot of malarkey. And things are only true if you look at them in historical context and see where they've changed, which is the process I just walked through with you.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
Yeah, when politicians are telling you to remain calm and focus on this distraction or that distraction, or othering this group or othering that group, it's time to be concerned. And accept that nothing will make sense without context. People go off and say this dumbest things, and because they don't have context in their belief. They just heard it from somebody and they believe that that's the reality of the situation. So next slide, because it's going to go right with this one. Do you know what FUBAR means?
Nope.
Effed up beyond all recognition.
Yes.
FUBAR.
Yeah, it's FUBAR, and this is where we live now. It's FUBAR. When everything is profit driven, the only thing that's getting done is the acquisition of wealth. Fact. Profit matters, not people. Needs, resources, the environment, or any of the fundamental building blocks of our survival are meaningless. Short-term profit is the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
Okay, and let's just be honest, the rich aren't that smart. They are trying to fill a need inside of them that would keep them in therapy for decades. So on the other side of this is, these are things that are facing us square right now, and the vast majority of us, and 46% are going to be unhoused, but the people right above them are going to be the next ones.
Yeah, that number is crucial.
Yeah. So we're looking at climate change. We already have extreme poverty. We have a pending economic collapse. I think I've made that argument. Dismember. If I haven't made that argument, please tell me I'm full of it. It's okay. Or join us next Sunday at Cups and tell me I'm full of it. I'm good with that. we need dismembering connection of community. We have been dismembering our connections with each other by othering each
Yes.
other for centuries, literally centuries. It's gotten fast and furious with social media. It's gotten much worse, but it's also given us a glimpse of how broken everything is.
Yeah. It's devastating.
Yep. And then there's governmental dysfunction. We don't hold them accountable,
Right?
and they are accountable to the people who pay for their reelection.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So, oh, you put up my okay background change. I had to jump. Locking up and controlling the resources, regardless of the consequences. Consequences of unhoused, hungry, and let's not talk about socialism. For God's sakes, we can't help people who can't pull themselves up by the bootstraps.
Yeah.
That's a myth and a half. All right, next slide. So here it is, and actually, oh, there. Okay, that thing had. This is a no-win scenario. When it collapses, and the red line going up over on the side is the wealth, and the blue line going down is the resources to people.
Wow.
This is from a recent study. But the other one here, when it collapses for everyone,
Yeah.
except the people like the billionaires have a lot farther to fall.
I think how much further that's going to be 12 years later, because the data is till 2016. Like,
yeah, it's changing daily now.
right.
So, going back to Star Trek again, it's the Kobayashi Maru. Nobody wins. This is what we're looking at, except that we can change it, but we'll go through a couple more slides before I get to that.
What was your quote at the bottom?
Oh, it's not really a quote. It's from Star Trek. If for those Star Trek fans, of which I am,
Yeah.
one is one, there's a test that captains have to go through called the Kobayashi Maru.
Mm-hmm.
Marwan asked me what time on Cups. It's 10 o'clock Sunday morning at
Nice.
Cups Cafe on 4th and Pacific.
All right.
Okay, so the Kobayashi Maru is you're surrounded by Klingons ready to blow you away, and you have to rescue a ship full of medical emergencies. And there's no way to win. You can't beat it.
Yeah.
The only way to be, but I'll give you the key here for the next few slides after this section, is James Kirk beat it by changing the rules. So we'll talk about that. Next slide.
Oops.
Up, down, go back. Yeah, there we go. So we need a change in our thought process. And I just wanted everyone who's gone through this now and is like thinking whatever they're thinking about this, think about this. Our way of doing things in this country and pretty much the world, but this country mostly, is we're falling from a 100-story building, and every floor we are heard to say, so far, so good.
That's scary.
But that's the way we think.
Yeah.
So next slide.
And we're conditioned to think that.
We are taught to think it from the time we
Yeah. Which makes us feel helpless. Like
Right.
this man.
But we aren't. And this could be all of us. That was kind of the
Yeah.
point of the slide.
Absolutely.
If it goes for everyone. And actually, a lot of the homeless people will be doing better than everybody else because they've been dealing with it for a long time. Isn't that a sad thing to think
Yeah,
about?
that's so true. That's so true. They've been able to get through so much because they've had to.
Yep. And the rest of us haven't even started thinking about it yet because so far, so good.
People don't even know how to put down their phones and live without one.
Yep. So next slide.
You don't have to personally attack me like that.
I just mean like resources
Okay.
wise,
So this is the part that I didn't list at the top but wait, we need to change our fundamental change in thinking, and we have to rewrite the rules. We all have to be James Kirk. Next slide. Oh, back one. Okay. So to boldly go, we have to imagine. So let's ask some questions. What does innovation look like when profit is not the motive?
Ooh, that is a loaded question.
It is. All of them are. What does resource usage look like when profit is not the motive?
The complete opposite is as how it looks right now.
Yeah. What does the quality of life look like when profit is not the motive? What do human relationships look like when control is not the goal?
Wow.
And Matthew, the thing about putting down the phones is also part of othering that people need to stop doing. Thank you, Matthew. All right. And said, what would the world look like if transparency were a real thing? So I want us to go into this next section thinking about what that would look like.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Imagine. I like that picture.
Mhm. So it'd be a different pyramid. Basic needs are met. Go ahead and click the thing because I've got pictures that'll pop up. Basic needs are met. Work and innovation. We have the ability to innovate things that we aren't trying to sell, but that might be the future. Meeting our potential, and I love to use the Federation of Planets as a model here because it's a way to get along. Back up one, not done. And then resiliency and capacity are based on humanity,
Yes.
not on on selling things. We stop
Yes.
using resources in the way that we're using them now because we're not trying to sell something that is going to be around for 6 weeks and then break.
Yeah.
I have 3 sets of Bluetooth headsets
I knew you were going to say that. Wireless headphones or Bluetooth headsets. Yeah.
that have come from the same company that have been replacements, and none of them work.
Yeah.
Not a single one of them works. So we need a different model. We need to think about meeting everyone's needs, and we need to allow people to work where they're called to work and support them in that by educating them and giving them the resources and tools so that
Yeah.
they can support other people. We need to let them innovate, because with that innovation that we aren't looking to sell something cheap and fast to somebody, we can do amazing things. We can meet our human potential.
Yeah. And not
And
just some resources in some places and meeting needs in some areas, but in all the basic needs, like on the hierarchy of needs, all that stuff needs to be met in order to have resiliency and capacity to meet our potential. And
And
work and innovation in turn will be brought up as well once we have those. So
right, and this is the way we do it.
yeah.
Part of back in 1963, when the first original series of Star Trek came out, Gene Roddenberry had created a world where no one got a paycheck. They were all paid, so to speak, on the work they did for society.
Wow. Imagine what that would look like.
Yeah, so people became artists and pursued their art and were supported in their art, and they had all of their basic needs met, and then more because of the work that they were doing.
Yeah.
So
Like
it was
passion. You don't
yeah.
get paid for passion. You can just do it the way that you want to do it and not have to worry about, profit margins and advertisement and,
and making somebody else really wealthy.
yeah. Right.
All right. So let's go to the next slide.
I really like that last slide.
So the future's up to us.
Pull our heads out of the dirt, right?
Yeah, and start working together.
Mhm.
Something we have been trained from birth not to do. We've
Yeah.
been trained from birth to be afraid of each other. So the very first thing that our organization tries to get people to do is grow gardens together and
Nice.
share the food throughout the neighborhood.
That's
Because
great.
it has 3 factors. It has a mutual benefit that attracts people to come as more fruit and vegetables and food is produced. More people in the neighborhood get interested and engage. That teaches people how to work together
Yes.
and provides capacity and food security that is going to be in short supply very soon.
And it's free,
Yeah.
right? And it
Well,
just grows on its own.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not free, but for the community,
well,
it's
there is an initial investment, but after that, the seeds get stored and you just use the same seeds for the next year.
and it's teaching them a skill. It's teaching the new generations that, hey, not everything comes pre-packaged and pre-made. You can actually get something out of it by putting in a little bit of work. All you have to do is water it with a
Right.
seed, prune it, whatever you got to do. And then you can feed your family. You don't have to
Absolutely.
worry about 7-Eleven and, Slurpees. You can actually have something sustainable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially people that have like special
No,
needs or dietary needs.
Yeah, no, I just thought the Slurpee was a great example.
I love Slurpees. It's just sugar.
Sugar and ice.
It's
and
so
water,
good
yeah.
though.
So next slide.
Matt's got a couple comments there.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's the first work party.
Yep.
Bring a shovel.
Yep.
What is the address, Mark, to
Matthew will have to put it down if he wants to.
no, not his address. Remember, we're using the location of the.
Okay. So Matthew will still have to do that. Matthew, can you write down the address of the West Side Improvement Club so people can meet there? It's going to be 9:00 tomorrow morning. All right. So next slide. All right. So this is kind of a misnomer in a way of a title, but I want people to be thinking about that we live on one planet with fixed resources. And let's be honest, going to Mars and terraforming that planet is so far beyond our science right now that it is nothing but a joke, a very bad joke.
That's sad.
So social, we have to have a fundamental shift in understanding of our relationship with the planet and our relationship with each other.
Yes.
We need to focus on our humanity. We need to focus on mutually beneficial outcomes, which gardening, by the way, is if you share the food.
Yes. That's a great example.
Yeah. So cooperation over conflict. We really need to stop this competition and conflict. And we need to start working with each other and listening to everybody's stories, even if we think they're batshit crazy.
Yeah.
They have to tell their story, and there's probably something in there we can learn from. And it's a way we have to learn to do things.
Yeah.
We have to work through consensus models. So everything, well, consensus is a pain in the ass because I can't get my own way. Well, that's kind of the point.
And those both go, the cooperation over conflict, that goes hand in hand with the fundamental shift in understanding.
Yep.
We can't have cooperation over conflict if we don't understand where everyone's coming from, and listen to everybody, what everybody thinks about it,
Absolutely. And we can go through the rest of it, transparency and all the rest of it. We've talked about the bad side of this. This is a good side of it. But we fundamental shift in how we raise our children and how we educate each other to get here. Absolutely. And it's generational work. But we can make some amazing shifts very quickly by starting. Okay, so operational form, we have to shift in the market, the way the market from a market to measure. We don't have how many things are sold, how many resources have we used?
Yeah.
How long does the product last? Is it meeting the need of the people? Yeah. Measuring the outcomes. We need to shift from resource intensive. We cannot continue to do the resource intensive stuff. We don't have the resources. We have one planet with fixed resources. Waste needs to become an asset. It doesn't need to be a landfill. It doesn't need to be shipped to China. It needs to be utilized and reused, and we all have to be on board together. We have to focus on modular designs. We have to make a design to last. We have to embrace innovation, and we need to shift to a local focus instead of shipping everything all over the planet. And if people can't make something, then we have to minimize the transportation to get something to someplace that they need it. And there are lots of models to do that. Actually, I just saw a documentary on the resurgence of dirigibles for things that don't have to get there overnight. So anyway, and then there was something I said at the bottom. I don't remember what it is now. So if we can go to the next slide. All right. So we the people, and actually, can you take away the gardening party at the West Side and bring it back after a minute? Because, all right. So we the people are the first three words of the U.S. Constitution. If you can click the button once, there's one picture that come up.
Don't get me started on the Constitution.
Well, the Constitution is actually a brilliant framework that we are not utilizing.
Yeah,
we haven't made an amendment to the Constitution in forever because it doesn't behoove people to actually make an amendment to the Constitution. It will change the fundamental way they make money.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of disinformation campaigns and media campaigns against the Constitution. What we need to do is have people working together to change it. And the presentation last week talked about the model to get neighborhoods to communities, to get a grassroots network, to start changing things locally. And we can do that on a scale all across the country and change this.
Right.
But we have to decide to.
Yeah. And people think they can't create change, but it just takes one person to affect change, and it starts literally with us. Like, we think that
Absolutely.
it's this huge thing that we can't control, but if we all think that way, then it is, it's
Well,
controlling us.
absolutely. And I've got a model for that if you hit the button one more time.
And then the
So,
people that are in charge have all the control because we get defeated.
right, but our inaction empowers them.
Right.
So this is a model of tipping points. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of dedicated people can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has."
I love that.
Well, science actually proved that.
hmm
Somewhere between 16 and 20% or 25% of the people start going in one direction, you will create permanent change over time. We can make this happen just by deciding to on a small scale and growing food and having people join us in growing food, having larger conversations and grow this. It is generational work, but
Yes.
we can make significant change quickly
hmm
because tipping points are being reached in other things. If we get just a few more people involved, we can change a lot of the things that we are doing.
Yeah. And that word generational, that's so important.
Well, it's not going to happen overnight. There's no light switch.
Yeah.
So next slide. There we are. The best journeys are those we take together. We each hold a piece of the puzzle. Bring it.
I love
Let's sit
that.
down and talk.
Bring it on. Bring your piece.
Yep.
Your piece and your piece.
I don't see myself up there.
I do. You're the blue one.
No,
No, you're the purple one.
I don't see a purple puzzle
The purple
piece.
one right there.
Not me holding it.
It's already in there. It's already a
I
part
already
of.
put my piece
You
down.
laid it down.
These are other people. We've already put our pieces on the table.
Touche.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the presentation on the economy. Any questions?
I don't have any questions for you. Do you have any questions?
Oh yes, there are lots.
Oh, he's got lots of questions. I'll probably
Okay.
come up with some questions.
So the presentation is done.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Thank
Take
you for
off
that.
and
That was
put us
great.
on.
Thank you.
All right. So I appreciate that. Well, just move that so we're both in view
Yes.
there. That is other way. There we go.
Down.
All right, that's perfect. You're standing, so once you sit, it's fine. There you go. See?
Okay.
Perfect. So there's a lot to unpack here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In this particular presentation, and I guess I'll get back to Maslow's hierarchy. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, so how do we go back or create a capitalistic society that works? We are addicted to low cost, quicker, faster, cheaper. Shifting to made in America means extremely expensive and low options and variety. So how do we do that?
It's transitional, and I can do that in a whole nother I can do it in a transitional slide presentation. Each of these presentations is to give a little bit more of the puzzle, the framework, so that we can sit down and have larger conversations. And you keep trying to rush it, Marwan.
Because we have a ton of conversations on that, right?
Well, think about last week's conversation and this week's conversation and how they fit together and how they expand the conversation.
So and I'm gonna segue and then I'll come back to this
Okay.
because there's some relevance here. In last night's meeting with the mayor, one of the things that he said was, the role of city government is not to build housing, right? But it is to, find partners, developers, and nonprofits that are willing to do that. And what I find problematic about that statement is it's that definition of insanity, right? If we just continue to do the same thing over and over again, we're going to get the same result. On top of the fact that not only is it piecemeal, it's antiquated, it's barely doing anything. And so even if they do more, it's really not going to address the issue. You know, I use the example all the time, right? Hey, 20% of this housing development is going to be affordable housing, quote unquote. 5 units, one is affordable. You know, 20 units, you know, you got 4 that are affordable. That is not addressing the issue fast enough.
Nope.
So my thought is, again, we are the lawmakers. We're the ones that make the policy and the procedures. It is we the people. So if we understand that this isn't working, we must do something else. And my frustration and the reason why I ran in the first place was we have to get people in office, we the people, that are willing and ready to do the new thing, to do the different thing in order to fix things. Can you just touch on, you know,
Well, we
your
talked
thoughts on that
we
statement?
talked about that last week.
Yeah, go.
If we create the neighborhoods and we get the neighborhoods educated up and in a person to person relationship, which is the best way to get a conversation going, we create a community network from representatives from the neighborhoods that creates a grassroots network. And it wouldn't take very much to actually change the policy of the city if you have enough people say this needs to happen, and we can get by all of the rhetoric about, oh well, the charter says and blah blah blah. It says, well, we're going to change the charter. It's takes time. There's no light switch. There's no magic wand. There's no silver bullet. It's going to need to be people coming together, having conversations, understanding that things need to change to fix it. And part of the reason I did this is to show people that homelessness isn't going to go away.
No.
It's going to get worse. And you are you've got a target in the middle of your back to be one of the next ones, because 150 million people are one paycheck away from being homeless.
You're in the batter circle and you don't recognize it.
Yeah. And the ball's about to come flying at you.
So give me your thoughts, because it goes with last week's conversation, this week's presentation, and last night, and just kind of the mayor's perspective on that. Is there a way forward that you can see in the way that he still views? I know you're smiling.
Well, actually, there were some revelations last night I should share with you. There were a couple of moments that I actually, and you know my history, my feeling about this.
Yes.
There were a couple of moments where I wanted to go grab the microphone away from him and defend him to complete morons in the in the audience who were so focused on their own fear that they couldn't see the conversation being had.
Talk about that.
I just did.
No, I mean, what were the comments specifically? Not the people. We don't want to put the people on blast, but
yeah, it was like, you know, talking. He was trying to answer them in a way of this is, and actually, I will be honest to say, he is doing way more than I expected him to do. And that was a surprise. I expected a dodge and sidestep show, and he didn't. And he said, "No, we are actually actively looking at doing these things." And that surprised me because I didn't think that was going to be the case. He's doing way more than I thought he would do. And you know for a fact that I don't like the man.
yeah.
So, and I'm honest about that, and I've never hidden that. And there's a reason for it, and we don't need to go into that now. But he's doing the job better than I thought he was going to be doing it.
And that's what I appreciate. The fact that you're able to acknowledge that, right? Not only is he not my favorite person, I don't like that guy, right?
Right.
However, I can be intellectually honest and parse out where I believe that he's right, or he's doing something that is good or efficient or effective, right? So I appreciate that, and more of us need to do that. We tend to kill the messenger, right? And it's like, well, doesn't matter if it's the truth. The sky is blue because this person said it. Well, you know, I just can't take that as the truth.
Well, you know, it'd be really horrible if I felt any other way and teach what I teach.
Well, this is facts, but a lot of people do, sir.
Yeah, but I try and I hold myself to the level of honesty that I need to have in order to be an example for the teachings that I do.
So we have a comment here from Terry, and she says, Margaret Mead, her quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has."
And the trick is, how do we get thoughtful, committed citizens? We have to teach people, and we have to teach people one-on-one because our system is failing to do so.
So my next question for you, sounds like you're advocating for deglobalization. How can that be done
No,
when
no,
we
I'm
are so
absolutely not.
dependent on our international business partners?
Okay, so there you just said business partners. I think globalization is going to be the norm, but I think we have to do localization to create security. I
Mm.
think there has to be a balance of both and not a buy-in to one or the other. Um, I think that a global look and bringing in the things that people talk. I mean, you've heard me say this many, many times. Our Power for All project is based on Germany and what Germany is doing. And they're doing that because Japan had the Fukushima incident from a very similar incident that to Cascadia Rising here, where they had a 9 magnitude quake followed by a tsunami that wiped out a nuclear power plant that is still dysfunctional today. And it was, and that's over 10 years ago. Um, and the levels of things we had to figure out for cleanup were phenomenal on all levels. But Germany looked at that and went, okay, we're going off nuclear now. 12 years later, they've closed all but 2 of their nuclear power plants. And those 2 power plants are sharing borders with other countries and are part of their baseline nuclear power. What did they do well, we're going to just turn off our nuclear. What are we going to do? They move forward on microgrids and renewable energy and combined strategies of generating energy from hydro to solar to wind. Even before they got into this in a big rolling way, they were paying farmers to harvest wind along with their crops by putting wind turbines in the fields. So they were moving forward. So I think that we have a lot to learn from other people in other countries, but we need to be open to an exchange of ideas, an exchange of knowledge, an exchange of working together on a more globally connected way. But locally, we need to start growing food locally because climate change is here. It's not gonna get better, much like our economy. And people are going to start having to deal with 100-degree days. And in stick houses, that's not going to be a pretty sight. We need if Kitsap County goes through Cascadia Rising tonight or tomorrow, we're going to be dark for up to a year.
Ooh.
And we have 80% of the people on this peninsula, I think somewhere around there, are electric heat. So 266,000 people are going to be cold in dark for a very long time. We need to change the way we do things here, and we need to focus on local generation of power. We need to make local growth of food. We need to start getting our act together so we can work together to deliver food where people need to if we don't have the transportation. And through these building of capacity in neighborhoods, we become stronger, more resilient, and create a grassroots network that can start changing things on a city level, on a county level, on a state level. And if people start adopting it, and I will tell you, we're being watched by people all over the world. People in my international network are waiting to see what we can do, and before they will start adopting it, we will happily give them all of our strategies for free. And we can start making a change locally to globally just by teaching people how to be human beings again.
So let me ask you,
Did I answer your question?
You did. I'm kind of
Okay.
giving you a second part to that.
Okay.
Maybe you can give a few examples, or
Because I don't really remember what the question was now.
or just elaborate a little bit more on how you just answered the question.
Okay.
Whatever it is we do, I think that people are resistant. Our decision makers are definitely resistant because it's going to upset the ecosystem, right? And even
Which
a small
ecosystem?
change is going to really change how America moves forward, right? There's going to be some severe growing pains. Folks are going to get hurt, and the impact is going to be negative before it becomes positive, right? So if we begin to make
But that's
things
already true.
start to do away with planned obsolescence, things of that nature, right? That it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful.
It's going to
But
be a transition.
we have to do this. So do you have any ideas on some things that we can implement to help that transition? Because folks are like, look, I can't pay someone $20, $25 an hour, right? Mom and pops can't do that. I can't give you medical. So I've just got to do smaller, and then the big box or the Amazons come in and come and destroy.
Right. So I haven't done the research recently, and I will try and do some by next week. But to my last count, there were 76 countries working on models for universal basic income. Even places in the US, there are some cities that are already looking at it because they know the models aren't working. The Roddenberry model, the Star Trek economy, is basically making sure everybody has housing, education, healthcare, food, water, all of the basic things that they need to live and survive. And that the first question people ask to stop the conversation that makes them uncomfortable is, who's going to pay for it? How's that going to get paid for? And I would say, well, right now there's probably nobody identified, but if we work together, we can find resources to make that happen. We have to change the fundamental shift, but it's not a light switch. It's going to take time. It's going to have to happen over time. And remember that slide in there where shows everybody falling. When it collapses, everybody collapses.
Right.
We're all going to be in the same boat. I just want to have something in place before that happens.
So I have some pretty grave reservations about UBI, right? In regards to, if there's no requirements for folks to essentially earn the UBI. There's two-pronged challenges that I see. One, you give everyone universal basic income, you've got a high population of folks that don't do anything, right? And then on the other side, you have, okay, we've got UBI, people have Maslow's hierarchy, those basic needs of, security and health and property and wellness and all that good stuff situated. And then the powers that be, right, take advantage of it and say, well, we can do this, but it's going to cost more. So we just keep increasing your rent because we know that the government is going to pay whatever we charge for water.
Which we have a perfect example here in Kitsap County with the military.
Go ahead.
So no, I mean that we with the military, they can keep raising rents because the military have a base rent that they continue to pay for people to live off of base in Kitsap County, and it affects everybody else around them until they can no longer afford to. The majority of people here can't afford to pay rent. So there are things that we all have to look at, and there are discussions have to have. But I've said again, this is not a light switch. It's going to take time. But in order for it to start at all, we need to have people coming together to have those discussions and start pushing for incremental changes as we can go forward. And as you pointed out several times, Star Trek happened because of a crisis that almost ended humanity. I think we have one of those on the plate, and I think we can start having a discussion because climate change isn't going to make it better for anybody.
And that was my next comment question. Do we rebound well after? Oh, we do rebound well after war. And so is this the unfortunate and tragic benefit we gain from the climate of our geopolitical landscape, right? I mean, we thrived after World War I, World War II. Is this what is needed? I mean, World War III, we may not have anything to come back to, but short of mutually assured destruction and global destruction, is this what we need?
Not if I have anything to say about it. I mean, really, our conversations and the whole point that we're doing these shows is to help people think differently and maybe come to the table and have these discussions, even when they feel that they have no power. Together, we have power because it is we, the people. And what if we, the people, and this is a big what if, and probably 10 years down the line, what if we, the people, decide that, okay, we need to change the structure of the Electoral College so that we actually have representative government and get to elect somebody that isn't chosen by the power parties?
Good luck, Chuck. Okay. Please tell me how we do that one.
10 years from now, it could happen because the parties are failing so visibly right now that it will be an interesting next couple of elections. They're just can't. The senator from Oklahoma who challenged the Teamster to fight in on the Senate floor yesterday, and then was held back by Bernie Sanders, who is not a muscle man. This is on the news today. that
Oh, wow.
a senator from Oklahoma who felt that the Teamsters, the president of the Teamsters had disrespected him, challenged the leader of the Teamsters to fight on the Senate floor. This is beyond joke now. This is like embarrassingly stupid. And this is what people are like looking at. The silent majority are looking at this and going, "Oh, how did we end up here?"
Mm-hmm.
And the only way we got here is because we allowed things to gerrymander, and that's changing in several key places. But I don't think. Okay, I'm going to take it in the face for this. The Democrats tend to be closer to my view of the world, but much farther right.
Mm.
If you're going on a right-left bias, the right-wing people tend to be, we own you, and you're going to do what we say, which I'm not okay with. So I am very far left of most Democrats because I think that there's a different way to go, and I think we can do it together in a democratic way. Go figure. That we can get together, we can talk, we can find human commonalities that have nothing to do with religion or politics or social status that we can all agree on and we can agree to make changes on. But we have to have those conversations.
Matthew says there's already an interstate compact gaining votes to eliminate the Electoral College.
Yeah, and it needs to go because it's what's keeping the Democrats and the Republicans in power.
Yeah, absolutely. Alexandra, do you have any thoughts or comments you want to add to the conversation?
No, I think it's been a great conversation. I learned a lot.
Are you going to be joining us more often?
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
The other thing I wanted to get to is, I love my chart here.
I kind of knew we'd be coming back to it.
Well, we were just talking about it.
Yeah, before the podcast, we were just talking about this, and I like this. When I speak about Maslow, I really kind of put number 2, and I throw everything under that, and then above that is the self-actualization, right?
Mm-hmm.
But really, I would say 5 and 7 are. I kind of look at 1, 2, 5, and 7, and things are lumped in there, right? And so the conversation I was having with Alexandria is, we're meeting people where they're at, and there are people that need food, water, shelter, sleep, clothing, etc. Right? But in that, we want to empower people regardless of where they're at in Maslow's. So maybe their safety is there, maybe their health is there, and so we want to give them 3 while they're trying to get 1 in place, right? People need love and belonging, that sense of family. And because Alexandria is new and we just are having a conversation, the one-on-one conversation today, and it's like, so Marwan, who are you? What is G2 about? What is this whole thing about? And that's really it, right? Gather together to grow together. The growing pains are painful, but you don't need to do those things alone. And it can be very hard to articulate how important number 3 is in order for people to move up through respect and recognition and that freedom.
And I do want to say something. I'm actually, don't be too shocked. I'm actually going to quote a meme I saw today that I found specifically insightful. Blood does not mean family. Blood means relationship.
Right.
Blood relationship. Love, respect, and commitment make family.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if it wasn't for my kids and grandkids, I wouldn't have family, right? If you were doing it off the definition of blood.
Yeah, and you mentioned that I may not like Mayor Wheeler, but I do respect that he is doing the work, and I honor him for doing the work. And that is me respecting people for who they are, where they are. And that is something I walk with every day. Though sometimes I got to admit that the words come out of my mouth make me like not seem that way. I had a couple expletive words by people who came up and spoke last night. And I'm just like going, Jesus, can you just shut up? But, you know, people have their feelings, and I know that they're coming from a place of fear. I get
Right.
that. Doesn't make it any easier to hear, nor does it move forward progress toward a solution. But they have to be heard. And as much as I don't like hearing it, I have to listen. And I have to
And
honor that they're speaking their truth as far as they know it.
and you and I have had this conversation about folks years ago when we first started this about people and that need to be heard, right?
Yep.
They haven't been heard. Shout out to Joe, for getting that to happen. And what I told her behind the scenes before it started is you realize that most people have never been in the same room as the mayor, let alone to be able to stand next to him and ask him a question, right? That is a powerful thing that she was able to give to the community yesterday. And a lot of people came out, and that's a big deal, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really appreciated a lot of the questions. I really appreciated some of his thoughtfulness. And as it turned out, there are several other conversations I'm going to be having with people, probably including the mayor, that I wasn't planning on having before I went to the event.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm glad you took my advice there, sir.
Well, the original advice I wasn't going to take until Mayor Wheeler said something that actually sparked a question in me, because the question I would have asked would have caused a lot of people in that room to get red-faced.
I
So
like the mayor, just for the record. I liked the mayor.
Oh, no, that's fine. I mean, lots of people do. And he's doing a job. I just like to be honest and transparent about my feelings so that people know that if I say something, I'm saying it from where I'm at. I don't particularly care for the whole. I like people to know that I don't particularly care for him, and that I never voted for him, so that they understand that when I say he's doing a job, I'm speaking to the point that I respect that he's doing the job.
Right. And more people need to do that, and for us to make gains.
Yeah, it's something you have to train yourself to do. Transparency and honesty are things that we need a lot more of.
Well, I got to say, we started this a half hour early.
And we're right at time.
We are right at time. We could use more time, right? There's even more questions, but I wanted to at least get a few of those down, just so we can have a little bit of back and forth, and to go a little bit further. Again, we want everyone to know Sunday, Cups Cafe at 10 p.m.
10 a.m.
10 a.m. Sorry about that.
There will be nobody there at 10 p.m.
Cup
I guarantee
probably
you that.
isn't open at that time, so don't show up. None of us will be there. But tomorrow is the work party, and it is the inaugural work party. So you're gonna want to come to this. So the gardening party will be at. We're gonna meet at 9 a.m. at Westside Improvement Club. That's 4109 West E Street in Bremerton. That's 98312, and we're going to meet there at 9 a.m. If you have shovels, gloves, bring them. And the intention is to, what is it, 1 yard at a time?
Yeah, pretty much. We've got a couple, 3 lined up and more in conversation now. Deanne and I had a great conversation the other day.
Good.
And we're looking at creating food forests in the neighborhood that people will be able to eat from.
Just a lot of fun, great opportunity. If you're looking for a place to get involved, like-minded people, this is a low bar, right? Folks are going to be smiling and doing the work.
Couple of hours, and we're basically going to be sheet mulching the land so that we can start planting in spring.
And it's a great way just to come in. It's a great conversation starter to feel like you're actually making a difference, because you are, right? Yep. Immediate difference. And meet some great people. So we hope to see you there. In 60 seconds, the Kitsap Housing and Homeless Coalition meeting is going to start. So we're going to say goodbye to Mark Boatwright Frost. Mark, I appreciate you tremendously. You are awesome. Thank you for your presentation. So very needed.
Hello, everyone.
Just really fantastic. Give you the final word.
Welcome to the November Kitsap
Whoops,
Housing and
sorry about
Homelessness
that.
Coalition meeting.
I was trying to figure out who's in the room.
Just letting people
When I say
in.
it already started,
and
it already
TV
started.
Shark, I'm gonna make
Unfortunately,
you a
I don't know how
co-host
to
just in
mute that.
case.
So we're just gonna have to deal with that.
Well, thank
Okay.
you so much.
Sounds good,
Give us the
Lisa.
final word, Mark.
Actually, I'm
Thank
probably
you.
jumping onto that with you, so
And
I will talk to you soon.
usually
All
for
right.
those of you who
Everyone,
regularly
key points and
attend,
puzzle
we
pieces,
have
go
kind
ahead
of a
and
soft
click on
start
over,
at
and we'll
2,
join
and
you
then
over
we
there.
start at
Bye-bye.
2